So let's talk to Robert Jenrick, MP, Shadow Justice Secretary. He's not very happy this morning, and no wonder, because this bleeding government, Robert, I have to say, is even worse than we ever thought it would be. I haven't really seen you for a while, but welcome back to the show. Two-tier justice. What's going on with this two-tier justice nonsense?
Well, look, the sentencing guidelines that we uncovered yesterday are a complete disgrace. They show that if you're a woman, if you're neurodiverse, if you're trans, if you're an ethnic minority, if you're from a minority faith group, presumably anyone who isn't Christian, then you are going to get a different treatment under the law. You are less likely to get a custodial sentence. Frankly, this is blatant bias against Christians and straight white men. And many people will be rightly furious at this. Your viewers and listeners were sneered at when they said that there was two-tier justice in this country. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, said that we were conspiracy theorists for saying so. Well, here it is, in black and white, the law of the land, the Sentencing Council issuing guidance to every magistrate in this country, telling them to treat people differently on the colour of their skin or the faith that they abide by. It's wrong and it needs to be stopped.
It seems incredible that it's even legal, doesn't it? I mean, Shabana Mahmood yesterday put out a statement saying that the Sentencing Council is entirely independent, but it strikes me as rather inefficient of her, to say the least, that she doesn't know what they're about to do or what they want to do.
Well, quite. These sentencing guidelines were signed off in a meeting with all the bigwigs from the legal system, including her own representative, one of the most senior civil servants at the Ministry of Justice. So either she knew about this, and it is her policy, but now she's having to change tack because people are so furious with it, or she was totally asleep at the wheel, had no idea what was going on in her own department. Either way, it's a terrible reflection. Look, I think there is creeping two-tier justice in this country. It's two-tier justice under two-tier Keir, just as you and many others have argued for a long time. We have to stop this now. The Sentencing Council have to scrap these guidelines. If they won't, we should be changing the law and ending their independence so that we don't have this situation going on forever.
And if you hadn't uncovered this, Robert, and I don't know how you did uncover it, but if you hadn't uncovered it, do you think they would have just tried to sneak it in under the radar?
Yeah, well, I was emailed by a magistrate who, like many others across the country, received an email from the Ministry of Justice, Shabana Mahmood's own department, telling them that this was now the rules that they should be abiding by from the end of the month. So how she didn't know about this, God only knows, but that was the case. We got it into Parliament. Now we've got it, thanks to you and many others, into the living rooms and in the newspapers across the country. We've got to stop this. I don't want to live in a country where you are treated differently depending on whether you're a straight white man or a Hindu woman. This is totally wrong, and it has to end.
Yes, and I'm not entirely sure that Shabana Mahmood has got a heart and soul behind changing direction on this, because she says in her statement she's registered her displeasure with them and she's recommended reversing this change to the guidelines. That doesn't sound like a minister or a Minister of State telling somebody what to do, does it?
No. Well, look, when I raised it with her in the House of Commons yesterday morning, she didn't seem to know anything about it. She turned to her ministers, blank faces followed. They didn't have a clue, frankly, and now she's sent a letter to the Sentencing Council. I'm sure they're quaking in their boots. It's not good enough. She should be saying to them, change this now, or we will change the law and force you to do so.
Yes.
That's what I would do if I was Justice Secretary.
Yeah. Another interesting story this morning, again something that you've spoken about many times, Starmer's secrecy over the Southport killers trial has been addressed once again, and this time by the terror watchdog, a guy by the name of what's his name, Jonathan Hall, KC, a King's Counsel. You know, we've heard from Keir Starmer, who likes to hide behind the law all the time, who basically said, look, I couldn't give out information about this case because it would have prejudiced the trial and nobody wants the trial to collapse. Well, now Jonathan Hall's saying, actually, by not giving out some information, the risk was even greater that the trial could have collapsed.
Absolutely. The decision of Keir Starmer not to put that information into the public domain created its own problems, because we live in an age now where people consume their news online. You know, rumours, misinformation can spread like wildfire. If you don't put sensible facts into the public domain, then that in and of itself can prejudice a trial. And that basically is what happened here, isn't it? Because everyone started to speculate about what might have happened because Keir Starmer was trying to prevent important information going into the public domain. And Jonathan Hall, Casey, cannot be dismissed. He's the independent reviewer of terrorist legislation. And he is basically making the argument that I made at the time, I know you did, Mike, and other people in pods, and Keir Starmer sneered and deprecated those of us who made that argument. And that is all reinforcing this growing view in the country that there's two-tier justice under Keir Starmer and this Labour government, and that's what we've got to fight against.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the immigration question once again. This was a subject very close to your heart for your entire career, really. I mean, you're immigration minister, of course, in the last government. Mafia cop killer free to roam the UK is on the front page of The Sun this morning. This is the latest sort of, I call them the now migrant story of the day. Latest person who should be kicked out of this country isn't for some reason because of the ECHR. Today we learned that this guy, because he's a mob boss, he's worried about other gangsters might want to kill him when he goes back to Albania. So now he's allowed to stay here, but nobody knows where he is. He's just roaming around.
Yeah, no, look, every day brings fresh stories, and this is one of the worst that I've heard. This is a man who should not be in our country. He should be being deported today. Get him out of this country and never allow him to return. It is wrong that our human rights laws are being abused, contorted and distorted out of all recognition to elevate the interests of men like this over the citizens of our own country. You know what I think? We should be reforming our human rights laws and having a situation where you can deport criminals like rapists, murderers, paedophiles immediately. And if you come on a small boat, you should be detained and deported within hours and days, not weeks or months. That is the system that we need in this country. Yeah,
and Rishi Sunak gave an interview yesterday in which he said perhaps we should just leave the ECHR, and everybody kind of went, sorry? Wasn't that what you were railing against when you were Prime Minister? And he also said maybe he shouldn't have come out with the phrase stop the boats, because we never really did.
Well, look, it's not about the slogan, is it?
No.
The failure of the last Conservative government was not about its communication strategy. It was that we didn't stop the boats. And ultimately, I chose to resign from Rishi Sunak's cabinet because I wasn't willing to be part of something where we were not doing everything in our power to make this happen, because the public are rightly furious. Now they see a Labour government with no plan whatsoever. The numbers coming across the small boats have risen by almost 30% so far, and Smash the Gangs has turned out to be a completely fatuous slogan itself. We've got to take action, and that means changing our human rights laws, deporting people as soon as they arrive, having the deterrent that we need as a country. That is the only way to tackle this.
And people say to me all the time now, is Robert Jenrick actually the leader of the Conservative Party? You know, you ran against Kemi Badenoch, a very close-run thing. She picked you to the post at the end of it. I actually said at the time, and I'm quite happy to hold my hands up, that I thought she would be the best choice. I think, like many people, she's been a bit of a disappointment. I don't expect you to throw your colleague under the bus or anything, but you do seem to be breaking through and cutting through more with ordinary people, certainly that I speak to, than she is at the moment.
Well, look, I think Kemi's doing a good job. It's tough being leader of the opposition, particularly after we've just suffered our worst ever electoral defeat. But she is landing blows. She's forced Keir Starmer into having that inquiry on the grooming gangs, not the full national one that we want. And we're going to keep fighting for that. But nonetheless, to change tack, she's changed the education bill that's going through Parliament, where Labour are trying to reverse the good changes that were made to our schools in recent years. So she's landing blows, she's changing government policy, and she's beginning the hard task of regaining public trust and confidence in the Conservative Party. But I don't pretend that that's going to be easy. It's going to take time. We have to show humility about the mistakes we made, including on immigration. And we've got to take the fight to this Labour government and show that we're hungry and determined and worthy of their trust in the future.
And so are you kind of working in tandem with her when you launch these kinds of, you know, campaigns like you are today, or like you did yesterday when you're talking about these very important issues around two-tier justice and all of that? Is that all with her blessing?
It is. Look, Kemi and I have a very good relationship. We work extremely closely together, and I wouldn't have joined her shadow cabinet if I didn't believe in her, believe that she could succeed. And I want to make sure that we hold this Labour government to account, which is ultimately our duty as His Majesty's opposition. And I'm trying to do that in my own way, in justice and the fields that I'm responsible for.
OK. One final one. I don't know what's happening about the Chagos Islands. Nobody seems to know for sure. There was talk that there might be a deal struck as soon as perhaps today, or certainly before the end of this week. What's going on with that? Do you know?
Well, we don't know. I heard the reports that it was being sent to the Mauritian Parliament. We seem to learn more in the Mauritian Parliament than we do here in our own Parliament at the moment, because of this culture of secrecy that Keir Starmer keeps perpetuating. You know my view on this. I think it's a very, very bad deal. We're giving away an incredibly important strategic asset, a military base in the Indo-Pacific, to an ally of China, and we are paying for the privilege to the tune of tens of billions of pounds. Look, you know, Donald Trump says that he might go along with it. That's disappointing, but it's not about what the President of the United States thinks. This is about our own national interest, and it's not in the interest of the United Kingdom to give away our own sovereign territory to an ally of China when there is no legal reason for doing this whatsoever. This was a non-binding advisory opinion by a court, and a court whose judges include people who've been appointed by Vladimir Putin and President Xi in China. Put the interests of the British people first. The public are furious that time and again, whether it's our illegal migration, the Chagos Islands, the interests of other people from other countries keep being elevated by this government over the interests of our own country.
Yeah, it is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. We're trying to find out as well, so if we find anything out, we'll let you know. Robert Jenrick, thank you very much indeed. Shadow Justice Secretary there, with a lot to say about the two-tier justice system in this country, about Chagos as well, and of course about the secrecy, culture of secrecy around this government and Keir Starmer. Two-tier Keir.